What do these games have in common? They're mostly games that I grew up playing, and they're also the games I'm going to talk about in this video about this book, The Score. A great book about metrics, how metrics shape our lives, and how the games can kind of explain different things in the world and our behavior. I'm going to go through these game by game. So I'm going to talk about Mario 3 and the Warp Whistle, riding the shell in Mario 64, getting good but not that good at Marvel vs. Capcom 3, my friend's exploit in Counter-Strike, Time Crisis 2 and my parlor trick, watching Moment 37 in Third Strike, and then a more recent game, playing through Dark Souls 3. Mario 3 is one of the first games that I remember. It's definitely the first game I remember learning about a secret, and that is getting a warp whistle. Going behind the stage, you get that warp whistle. And secrets were like an important thing as a kid, where you would learn it from someone else, and then you'd be excited to teach it to someone else that didn't know about this secret in the game. And you'd go to the store to look at a magazine, and then just jump to reviews, and then jump to the secrets, tips and tricks section, and see if you could learn about some secret in the game. And the warp whistle in Mario 3 allows you to jump to a different world. Then you could get a second warp whistle, and then if you use this while you were in this warp zone, then you could jump to the very end of the game, World 8, and skip everything else and beat the game very quickly. That's what you would do every single time if you only cared about how quickly you beat the game. But if you want to have fun and experience the great level design in the game, it has that world where like everything is huge. That's awesome, but you would never experience that if you always do this double warp whistle trick. And Nguyen writes about this and what can happen if you only focus on the goal and efficiency reaching the goal. He writes, if we cared about the goal by itself, plain and disconnected from constraints, we'd just take the most efficient path. If all we cared about was getting the ball through the basketball hoop, we'd use a step ladder. That's the end of the highlight. And this is in real life. If you are doing all these things only focused on the outcome, it's that thing of enjoy the journey. You would never enjoy the journey if the only thing you focus on was the outcome. Or I've heard this analogy, or this way to think about it is if you took the stakes away from Mount Everest, and if you just got dropped off at the top with a helicopter or whatever vehicle could actually like just drop you off at the top, then would you consider that an achievement? Probably not. Not, and definitely not in the same way as if you climbed it up yourself, because it's taking that inefficient path that is so important. It's the growth in going through that full journey. Next game, Mario 64. I'm not doing all Mario games, but this happened to be the example from Nintendo 64. So one of the best moments in gaming is, I think, when you jump on the green shell for the first time, and then you're surfing around in that first world. You've already kind of experienced all of the 3D movement with Mario, climbing the tree outside of the castle, running around, just sort of getting a sense of the controls. But then in that first world, you have the mental model of Mario. I know I can like jump on one of these turtles, something will happen that will kill it. But then you can ride on the shell and you feel like speed, tight controls, and it's beautiful. It's an example of one of the first times in games where I sort of played just to feel like the feeling of that game mechanic, where, yeah, I'm kind of like going for the stars, but there would definitely be times where I would just want to jump on the shell and move around the world because of how good that felt. And then I would start to, and I'm guessing a lot of people tried this and had this goal in mind, which was an unofficial goal, to just try to ride the turtle shell all the way around and up that mountain or hill, whatever you would call it, but pretty much to the top of the stage. In The Score, Nguyen writes about this idea of achievement play versus striving play. Here's the highlight. In striving play, we adopt scoring systems for our own reasons. We dally with them for as long as it takes to get what we want, and then when it's done, we throw those cares away. You're collecting the different stars to progress, but then you can also just explore the stages. Ultimately, yeah, you are really like continuing to collect the stars to unblock different parts of the castle. But that level just sticks out for me because that's where I threw away the idea of like getting these stars just to ride around on the shell. And oh yeah, I'm supposed to relate this to like real life. This is where you want to build awareness for where you are being a striving player or where you're being an achievement player. And if those align with the values that you want to embody. In the score, Nguyen talks about picking up yoga, and it was beautiful at first, allowed him to put himself into different positions that he wouldn't have been able to get to without yoga. But then there was sort of this scoring system, progressions that he was trying to hit. And then eventually progressing became more important, and he was starting to tweak different things in his body because he wasn't really ready for that progression, but became so eager to just like keep on progressing that took over. And that's where the achievement play became more important than the striving play. Next game, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. 1999, I bought a Dreamcast on Outpost.com, free overnight shipping, no tax. And then Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came out a few months later. I think it was like 6 months later. I think Marvel vs. Capcom 1 was a launch title. Anyway, I was really, really pumped about this. I would play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 with friends, and it was somewhat even between our group. At this point, I think I'm pretty good. So I go to the arcade. I see this guy playing as, I always remember like that he picked Thanos, and then another character was Sentinel. I can't remember who the third character was, but I just had never really seen people use these characters. So I thought, I'll be able to beat this guy. I asked him if I could hop on, and he smirked at me, and then he destroyed me. I realized I was terrible at the game, but I went back home and then went online and started looking up how to use Sentinel, learning about like top tiers and team combinations. And then, of course, how to use Cable. And at a certain point, I was pretty much able to beat my friends all the time, like spamming Hyper Viper Beam, 3 times or whatever it is. I still wasn't good at the game. Like if I went back to the arcade, then I wasn't able to win consistently at all. Nguyen writes about this sort of scenario where he plays a lot of board games with his spouse when they find a new game that's pretty balanced and how much fun that can be exploring that new game. But then he talks about eventually he'll start to, go online and see a strategy guide, but he chooses not to read it. He writes here, "My spouse would never read a strategy guide. That's not the kind of person she is. So if I read the strategy guide, my skill at the game will jump way ahead of hers and I'll start winning. But our games will lose their delicious balance and be much less exciting." Further on, he writes, "What I truly care about is not the win, but the quality of the struggle." That's the end of the highlight. And he cares about having fun with the game. And that is something that I destroyed with Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I just wanted to build this winning streak. And then we just eventually stopped playing because it just wasn't fun anymore. I was leaning too far into being an achievement player, but not good enough at the game to warrant being so far into that achievement side. Instead, I should have been a striving player, tried out different characters, and that would have extended the length of time that the game was fun. If you are an Olympian or if you are in real competition, competitive sports, then there are times where achievement is more important, winning actually is more important, or if there's something you need to get done, that achievement mindset can be very good. No one cares if you're having fun, if you're at the deadline. If you really, really are doing something that's for leisure, that's supposed to be fun, going too far on the achievement side can ruin it. Okay, next game, Counter-Strike. There was this time that we found out my friend was going on this server that we all played on in the middle of the day and would just be hopping, diffusing this bomb over and over and over and just diffuse, just a bunch of diffuse attempts. The server had some V-bulletin integration to create this leaderboard. It was taking all these different actions, like games that you win, kills, whatever it is, and you would get points for these different things. It reset every month. We found out that a diffuse attempt gives you, I think it was 100 points, 10 points, I forget what it was, but you could just spam this and get a bunch of these attempts. You didn't have to complete the diffusal. You just had to start the attempt, and then you got all these points. One of my friends, who was legitimately at the top of the leaderboard, didn't talk to him for a week. Real world ramifications. This is an example of my friend being value captured. This is a term in the score from Nguyen, and he writes that value capture occurs when you get your values from some external source and let them rule you without adapting them. That's the end of the highlight. And in this case, it probably wasn't even fun. It's just the thrill of rising up the leaderboard It's obviously not as fun as actually playing the game and playing matches when the server is full. So he definitely was not being a striving player in that moment. He was being an achievement player, but more focused on this single metric of like total points that bring you up the leaderboard. He was doing it by any means necessary. This weird exploit where you could just go on and then diffuse over and over and over. This can happen in our life outside of games also. One popular method of like productivity was this idea of inbox zero, which could be good. It's like reply to things quickly so that they don't take up, back burner energy. Your inbox stays organized and you have this system for triaging everything right away. But then it becomes something that people took way too far. You became too focused on inbox zero. So you were just checking it all the time to see if you got new emails that you could then apply your system to, or you get used to replying super fast without actually digging into the problem. Responses are coming in because the more you send, the more you get back. So it can be good to just, again, build awareness around the metrics that you're paying attention to and the metrics that you're striving to improve. Question if you're overfitting yourself to metrics that are not reflecting your values. Don't get value captured. Next game, Time Crisis 2. Played Time Crisis 2 a bunch in the arcade. And my parlor trick was beating this on 1 credit without dying. This became this artificial constraint. It wasn't enough to beat the game. It was to beat the game without dying. I was picking a different level of difficulty. This is something that I do all the time. I don't pick like Nightmare Mode or anything like that. This was a particular game where I was trying to make it harder. And in the score, Nguyen writes about games giving us this freedom. Here's the highlight. This is the incredible part of games. Whatever feeling you want, whatever kind of absorption or intensity you desire, whatever level of difficulty works for you at that moment, you can find it. Games offer you the freedom to sculpt the world, the tasks, and the goal to give you whatever kind of process you want. And they do it because the goals are detached from the world, because you can modify the goals and constraints for your own private joy. That's the end of the highlight. Arcade games are some of the least modifiable, but in that case, I was able to make it more difficult by just saying, like, I'm going to try to do this without dying. In the real world, outside of games, it can be good to strive for this type of freedom, this type of autonomy in your career. What comes to mind is Cal Newport's idea of career capital, that earlier in your career, you don't have this freedom, but you sculpt your career in a way that you build up skills, finish projects, build trust so that you have this career capital. You can start to choose the projects that you're working on, the type of work that you do, and you can start to sculpt your career in the same way that you can sculpt the world in a game. Next game, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. So this is more of me as an observer, of course, of Evo Moment 37. Daigo parries this move, Chun-Li's super art, and then jumps, finishes, and Justin is sad. And seeing the reaction to it and just like looking at the game and seeing the parry over and over and over. If you've played the game, you can see it's pretty hard. And even if you haven't played the game but are familiar with video games, it looks like it's obviously hard. But when someone breaks it down to, oh, they have this much of a frame opening, there's this much pressure, blah, 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 then it makes it seem even harder. I was looking this up. I think these are the right numbers. So it takes 10 frames, or you get 10 frames to parry most of the hits. It's 16 hits, and you get 7 frames to parry in the air. So maybe I've seen the crowd saying like, oh, it's not that hard. A bunch of people in Japan were already doing this. I think no matter what, doing this 16 times in a row under pressure makes it pretty hard. But then I've also seen some people trying to that play fighting games, trying to explain it to a layperson, and they say, oh, it's impossible. And there's this misconception that each of the parries was a 1 frame opening, and that's not the case. It's not that impossibly hard. It's somewhere in the middle. But it maybe is hard to understand the difficulty of it without trying it in the game. In the score, Nguyen writes about assessing the difficulty of things. In this case, he talks about the difficulty of different climbs in rock climbing. He writes, in fact, when non-climbers assess the difficulty of climbs, they tend to get it completely wrong. Non-climbers are very impressed with fast climbing and big leaping movements between large holds, which are often relatively easy for experienced climbers. That's the end of the highlight. And this is the week that Alex Honnold climbed up that tower in Taiwan for Netflix. It's obviously hard to climb that tower, but then you hear that for rock climbers, for Alex Honnold, he would probably put it around like a 5 out of 10 on difficulty. T1 also writes about yo-yo, and it can be hard to discern which tricks are hard or not. I used to play a lot of Brood War. When you see professionals playing, you can kind of tell it's hard, but then when you see a POV of them and seeing how quick, like how much, what it looks like to actually play at 300, 400, 500 actions per minute, it becomes obviously hard. Nguyen writes about this difficulty of the general public judging experts in their fields. The experts report out these metrics. He writes, public metrics let us peer into each other's lives. They make us comprehensible to each other, which makes it easy to judge one another. But the price is that we are bound to use only those values that everybody can instantly understand. That's the end of the highlight. So there are these simplified metrics to represent the performance of these nuanced things so that we can judge the success of experts, even though we are non-experts. Then what that can do is change the behavior of the experts so that they start overfitting their behavior to improve that oversimplified metric with no nuance. And so an example outside of games, but still probably in the digital world, you can see how many views this video has. It's likely not a lot. It's a public metric for the world to see. On the other hand, maybe I got a private message from someone saying how it influenced them positively. I didn't, but we can say that happened, and I could continue on making videos motivated by the knowledge that at least someone out there finds it useful. Or I could shift completely away from it strictly because I saw there's not many views, it's not performing well by the standards of that public metric of views. This would be moving toward being value captured, and that's something to try to avoid doing. That said, like, the metric is not completely useless. I'm not an expert, so it helps to guide me. If I have a bunch of videos that are getting no views, then maybe I need to start paying attention to that. Next game, Dark Souls 3. I don't play games regularly as much anymore for probably like a decade, but every year I want to play a game again. One year I decided to get into games and actually followed through, so I picked Dark Souls 3. I guess I valued this idea of like being good at games and skill. I knew that these games had a reputation for difficulty. If I could beat this game, then I could tell myself that, you know, I grew up playing games and it's still inside me somewhere. Something like that. I did beat it. It took forever. It was one of the editions where the DLC was included already. There's the completely optional boss named Sister Frida, but I got stuck there. Took probably 100 plus attempts, maybe like 2 weeks that I would just like turn the game on at night, play for a few hours, not win, and just go to sleep frustrated. I had to grind to like level up enough to be able to beat her. And then I was leveled up so much that the rest of the game was somewhat easy. That may have been the last single player game that I beat. I guess I enjoy that part of the difficulty curve, but at the same time, it's very hard to just jump into games like that. So maybe that's a reason I don't pick up games every year. The difficulty curve is something that T1 writes about in the score. In the section about yo-yos, something that he liked to do was practice a trick until he could do it consistently, and then he would just move on to the next trick and then kind of forget about that previous one that he's mastered. So he writes, I like a particular spot on the difficulty curve, the moment of epiphany when things start coming together. So when I have free reign, I pick my challenges to surf my favorite, tastiest spot on the learning curve, but that's just my preference. The world of yo-yo players seems to be full of people like me. There is always some newer, harder trick to learn or invent. Other people like to be elsewhere on the difficulty curve. Some people like eternally repeating a skill they've already mastered. Others can take a level of frustration and failure that I can't handle and crave games of ungodly difficulty like Dark Souls or Winter Mountaineering. That's the end of the highlight. I liked Dark Souls 3 and that experience, but it took a lot of hours to do that. I tried to play Elden Ring a few years ago and it was just like, this is too hard. This is too much of a commitment. I won't be playing this. I'm getting that itch again, and I think that is an outcome of reading this book. I don't think it was like the main goal that T1 had in mind for the book to influence others to play more video games or more board games. It was more about like building awareness of how metrics, scores shape our lives and how that can go wrong if we're not careful. But for me, the takeaway is, man, games are really valuable. Games have sometimes no value in the real world. Many games, in a sense, are pointless, but that can be what makes them valuable. It's very high stakes in that contained world of the game, but then you can walk away from it after exploring different forms of agency. So I charged my Steam Deck and installed Street Fighter 6 so that I can try to be an achievement player and rise up the ladder. First, I'll need a strategy guide.